We can just chat.
Yeah,
Okay. So how did you find the writing process? Was it easy for you?
shockingly, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was easy for me because I feel like I had no idea what I was going to write. I put it on my to-do list. A lot of the times I put writing tasks on my to-do list and they just seems to sit there and I just push it from day to day to day to day to day. But this happened to be a week in which everything was relatively quiet and I was walking a ton with my dog on my property here. We just walk up and down the driveway because in the middle of summer, you can't walk into the woods without getting covered in all sorts of critters. Um, the Georgia South or the United States South, I feel like is a lot like Australia in the sense that I always think of Australia as like filled with dangerous animals. Like the South in the summer is the same here. A
Wow.
lot of snakes, chiggers, spiders, ticks, all that kind
Oh
of stuff. So,
no.
and yeah, um, so happened to be a week in which I was like, yep, totally good. I feel like writing it. And I knew that I knew from the beginning that I wanted to write something that felt like it was going to help with people's like skepticism, right? That they needed to kind of address that aspect of it. And so uh, all of a sudden, these steps came forward that it was like, no, it's not just skepticism. It's the things that have like honestly kind of bothered me, niggled at me, or there are things that I've had to directly get over in my own experience, right? Two of them being, what is the need for protection and having skepticism, and like how do you use those things to your advantage? Because that is truly something that I've learned the hard way in terms of, well, skepticism is something that has just simply been limiting to experiences of wonder in my, um, it's it's something that feels like it's very it just acts as a regulator on your system and your ability to kind of take something in and remember it and really like nurture it in your system to say yes, this is real. And so what I would do is I would basically just on my walks I would just start voice speaking about it. I would just be channeling while I was walking, which is one of the easiest things for me to do because it's like the locomotion and all that kind of stuff really helps with the process of moving energy. And so I talked about skepticism, and then it became clear that protection was another one because I think that actually came up in one of our conversations. I missed that call. I watched a couple minutes of it and I was like, oh, okay, I think I may not watch the rest of this because it was very heated. I don't know if I should say that in the recording. Sorry, we could cut it out maybe. um, and and so I was talking with Esther, another one of the authors, about it and and kind of forming my own opinion about protection in with regards to this area. And so then naturally protection became the second thing that I wanted to write about. And then the thing that I really am very actively passionate about is the desire to not create separation between people who understand and experience these things and the people who don't. Like that to me is so dramatically important because anybody that accidentally splits spiritual hierarchy, like puts hierarchy into all of these things and creates niches and different, oh, I'm in this group and you're in this group. It's like, no, guys, y'all like that's not the point. Like we need to like really, really actively work against the fact that, even awake asleep, like even that one, that's been a long one that I've had for a long time, right? With this understanding that, Ramdas says everyone is waking up. Everybody's in a different stage. But we're not judging the stages. We're not doing anything along those lines. We are all just waking up. And so then it just kind of naturally progressed in that way. And I used voice and then I would translate it over and actually write it down when I got to a place. So that's a very long answer to your question.
Yeah, it's a wonderful answer actually, because that's the easiest way, one of the easiest ways to actually get writing done is to just voice record. Because I myself speak and I process my thoughts better when I speak than when I write. Because when I write, I want to do it perfectly and I want to use the perfect words, and then I want to go to my thesaurus and see if there's another word I can use, and then I forget my train of thought, and I'm like, no, I just, speak it and let my voice become the words as I transcribe. And it works well for a lot of authors. So I always use that method. But it's funny what you said about the heated conversations that we have as the authors of this book, which is so new to me because none of the other books I've done, the co-author books I've done, do we have these conversations that are so passionately heated where the perspectives are so different. And I love it. Like, I love it because it shows the passion that everyone has in their own understanding of what it is and in their own like way of explaining or interpreting certain things. And it's like, yes, this is what I need, because when I got like the downloads for what this book was going to be about, I kind of saw it as each person representing a certain portion of humanity. So you have the skepticism aspect of it because there's a bunch of people who are skeptics. Someone else has a portion that are like, all about love and light. And so there's a bunch of people who are represented by that. So each person has their own representation of the bigger humanity picture, and together we are still coming together and saying, look, this is all of our perspectives put together. And like you said, there's no judgment here. We allow each other to have the conversations and bring these topics up and speak freely about it without it being, I'm right, you're wrong. What I believe is good, yours is bad, whatever. There's no judgment. It's just, this is what it is. If it resonates with you, good. If it doesn't, good. It's fine. So I'm so excited for this book. I think it's going to blow a lot of minds because there's so many different perspectives in it. And it will open up a lot of other conversations that maybe haven't been had yet about
Yeah.
these things. So that's exciting too.
I love that perspective. I love that perspective so much because, uh, I think it's a really fascinating thing because I know that people who've had to be entrepreneurs in this area and who've had to kind of, especially if they're very vocal and they've have to have a personality that lends itself to that, right? To be incredibly courageous and brave, not be not not care about being direct, not care, all of these different things. And so I think you have a mixture because you have that representation of humanity, you have a mixture of that. um and so it's like, there's no, I think it's an interesting thing to see that, because sometimes on that spectrum you see people who are just like, oh, but it's all love, so we can't have conflict, right? And then you have other people who are used to dealing with, they don't work on a team, right? They're just by themselves kind of doing it, and they're just like, this is it, I get to make all my decisions, and I work by myself so I can make all my own decisions. And so being able to see what constructive conversations look like in that space, in which people are being aware of it, when they're being open and receptive to saying, are we coming from a totally fear-based mentality right now? Are we, where is everyone coming from? I think it's a really wonderful way to frame it, and a wonderful perspective to take on how you can have conversations with people who are dealing with a lot of different energies. You got to imagine that if there's groups of you know, ultra dimensional or extraterrestrial beings, maybe they're having similar kinds of conversations, right? As they try and get along.
Yeah, for sure. And I was actually speaking to Vivek yesterday, and I said to her, if we don't get along as humans, like, oh, I'm, this color skin and I have this color hair and I live here or I speak this language or whatever, and these are our barriers, then how are you going to deal with a mantis being or some other being that's completely different and has completely different everything, that will completely just throw you off. You will go crazy, like literally, maybe if you don't learn how to deal with your triggers and the things that are keeping you in a fear-based mentality because someone else is represented differently, yet we are also humans, like how are you going to deal? How are you, like, I'm seriously asking the question, how are you going to deal with a literal extra dimensional or extraterrestrial if you cannot, deal with your neighbor, like seriously? And that's, the whole point of this is like a guide. It's a guide for humanity. We're not telling you what to do. We're saying these are our different perspectives. Take from it what you feel resonates with you. Take from it where you feel you are represented and your ideas are being represented, and use that, build on that, grow from that. Do something where you can serve yourself, serve others, and keep that high vibrational state a priority instead of falling back into the fear-based thing. Because you mentioned earlier, like, it's a scale, there's a spectrum. Everyone is on a different level. It's not I'm awake and you asleep. It's where are you on the scale? Wherever you are, it's fine. We're not saying that you should be here or there, but be aware of it at least so that what to do and what's going on, and or don't do anything if you don't want to. But at least be aware so that you're making empowered decisions and not just going by what people are telling you or what you think, whatever. If you can make informed decisions and not be subject to, like, uh maybe if somebody just says something, you blindly accept it or you blindly reject it because you don't know enough you know so I actually wanted to ask you, do you
Yeah.
speak to your kids about this topic in general, or do they speak to you about it?
Yeah, I'm very open about kind of all of this, all of it, right? Because I know that children, any children, my children, anybody's children are coming in. I always thought it was interesting. Years ago, they were talking about indigo children and about how indigo children generation came in, right? Like 75 to 90 or so, like maybe 95, that's, there's that kind of era. People will spread that out depending on how they would like to be included in that group, really. But then they were supposed to be the ones that broke everything, right? The ones that broke everything so that then you could have these crystalline children come in, right? And so that, the end of Gen X and the beginning of Gen Alpha and almost all of Gen Alpha would be crystalline children, right? Who would have difficulty in a world that wasn't more suited for them. And I can't help but feel that in some ways indigo children may have failed a little bit at that, like we didn't break it enough. Like, so I'm putting myself in that group. I'm just saying the generation before maybe didn't break it enough, because it does feel like, but at the same time, I always firmly believe that we're exactly where we need to be. So an example of that would be that my children, to give my children as an example, we lived out in the woods in Indiana and chose to move back down to the South where I'm from, in Georgia, and lived in Atlanta. And then when the pandemic came, it became very clear to both my husband and I that, all of a sudden we had the freedom to be able to move because everybody was work from home. Like, we had the freedom to be able to move out into the country again. And I'm surrounded by woods, and I'm kind of making it so that my children are having a more sensory friendly experience than they would have in a city. I'm privileged enough to be able to have done that because when I talk to my kids, I talk to my kids about all of it, right? About, their sensitivities, what they're seeing all the time, I kind of treat it as that casual conversation of just like, oh yeah, my teacher, oh, the one who's an alien, like that kind of stuff. It's just, and I'm always careful to say, to give them a context of the fact that, like, there's a level of there's within consensual reality, right? The shared reality that we all have, there's a group of people who are in what is a very self-protective place, right? It's going to, and it sees any outside thought as a virus that comes into its system that needs to be eliminated. And we just live and let live with those people until they choose to self-select themselves out of that insulated space, right? And then that's where we choose to build our community with, right? It's like we're always like, we're not going to pretend that doesn't exist, and we're also not going to denigrate that group, because totally understand why you want to keep your, everybody does that to a certain extent, right? Everybody has that self-insulating system, and any outside thought, you really have to say, are you an enemy, or are you, are you a friend? And so keeping my kids aware of what that is, keeping them aware of the conversations that we can have within our space and the community that accepts that. I have people in my community who are they'll come to my channelings, and some of them are just incredibly rational, grounded meditators. It's like, I did a nature spirit channeling last year and invited two people from our community, and they were like, yeah, I've never done that before, right? But they'd been all through the world of spirituality. So it's like, we're constantly exposing each other, whether it's kids and adults, friends, community, all that kind of stuff. And we're tolerant. And that's the really important thing. We're not treating it like something that needs to be destroyed. And that's the value that I want to teach my kid more than anything, that their experience is valid and actually incredibly important to nurture. And there's an aspect of consensual reality that they can attenuate themselves to, depending on where they are.
Oh yeah, 100% I agree with that. And it's funny because I live in the countryside. So I've got the ocean and I've got the mountains and I've got clean air, and it's just wonderful here. And when I found out I was pregnant, I was going to move to the city in another province to go and stay closer to my parents so that we could have more help. And nothing was working out. Every time we tried to do something or make plans towards moving or find a place there or look at houses or whatever, something would come up. And I was like, this baby doesn't want us to move. Like, this baby wants to stay here. So maybe we should just stay here. And as soon as we had that conversation, everything was fine. Everything was calm. Everything was just flowing and working out. And I was like, this is so weird, because I never experienced with my first baby, because I know that obviously they are aware, they know what they're coming into, they've chosen, certain things, and it's all planned and orchestrated to a certain extent. So I know that I'm just playing a role, and I have to be open to the guidance that comes in when it comes in, because I don't want to make things harder for myself. I mean, it's already sometimes unpleasant, and you have to deal with so many things, and you've got a whole life, and you've got a family, and you've got work, and so many things. You just want to let it be smooth flowing. And it's the same. Like, I think about how sometimes questions come up. Kids ask questions, and you're like, how do I say this? Because you don't want to lie, but you also don't want to tell them things that are going to upset them. But at the same time, I'm like, maybe it's not my place to decide if this is going to upset you or not. If I'm just going to be honest with you, and you can make your own decision based on, the tools I've given you and I continue to give you about following your intuition, going within and seeing, how does this make me feel? Does it make me feel good or bad? And then following that guidance and trusting and knowing that how your intuition guides you is the correct way for you to move forward. And if the questions are coming, that means that there's already an interest there. There's already some kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, maybe, I don't want to use the word passion or purpose, because that can change at any time. But, there's something there that needs to be nurtured. There's some questions I have there that needs to be explored, that they need to understand. And so maybe it's my purpose in that moment to give them the correct information so that they can make their own decisions. Because we look at kids like, oh, you're just a kid, you cannot, decide for yourself or whatever. But that's not the case. They are purely based, like, working on instinct, which is exactly how they should be doing it, because they're following their guidance system all the time. They're not worried about, survival stuff. Oh, I need to pay bills and this and that. Their judgment is not clouded by 3D things that we are maybe clouded by. you know? So
Yes.
it's very interesting for me. And I remember this conversation I had with my daughter. She said something about like creation, like like God created things, like, oh, he made the planet and the this and the that, and he made aliens. And I said, yeah, he made aliens, he made everything, everything, every alien you can think of. And she's like, wow. And I'm like, yeah, I'm also so wowed by that. The same God that made me made the alien sitting somewhere doing some alien stuff somewhere else, like that is mind blowing. And she thinks about those things that I think about. And I want to engage in conversation with her about it, but I don't think she has all the vocab yet to fully put in sentence form everything she feels about that. So I'm waiting for her to get older so we can have those fun conversations.
It is. It is. It's funny. It's have you ever either read or watched The Giver by Lois Lowry?
No.
It's the basic premise is that it's speculative fiction. It's like it's a future society in which they've somehow managed to pull the emotion out of the vast majority of everybody. But when they pulled it out, they put it into one person. So one person holds all the emotion, all the memories of the entire society, right? And they're supposed to remind people kind of like they're without telling them a lot, they're supposed to be like, don't do this. This is a bad idea, because they actually have a historical memory of whatever it is. But the interesting thing is that the one who is the giver, right? Or the taker, so to speak, the holder of memories, um, they're the only ones who can see color in this society. Everything else is black and white. Every other person who's had emotion taken out of their life, they don't see color. And when it comes to my children, I imagine that they not only see the full spectrum of color, but they can see, how they can hear more and they can see more. Like literally they have the senses to be able to do that. I feel like my kids have the sensitivity. I feel like all kids have the sensitivity to be able to see the ultraviolet, the invisible, the things that the rest of us have kind of maybe gotten rid of, or, like our eyes have just become too conditioned, our ears have just become too conditioned. And they can see colors, so to speak, that we can't even fathom. And the more that we treat their experience of those colors as totally normal, even though we might not remember what that's like exactly, or we might not have that same experience, I think it's so important. Yesterday, when I dropped my daughter off at camp, she was so confident. I mean, she was nervous, but she was so confident. And I was like, are you good? Everything's okay? And she's like, oh, this year I have my dragons with me, right? So she has these books that she's been reading, and they have all these dragons, these dragon tribes. She's just like so into them. And it started with just one, and now it's a whole bunch of them. So now she just basically has these massive dragons of any type circling around her in her field all the time. And it gives her the confidence to be able to do anything. And I'm just like, that's a color that, like, I may have done that. I don't remember doing that, but I have my own version of that. And it's like allowing that to be nurtured in whatever way it can be. It's such a wonderful thing to be able to do as a parent, because I know that that hasn't been done in previous generations, right? We see movies of depictions of previous parenting tactics of like trying to control and do things like that. And my daughter's just like, is this real? Like, this doesn't feel real.
Yeah. Yeah, it's insane because I think about it sometimes. Like my parents would never allow, or even I had my grandmother, she's passed on now, but she was so mean and she was so strict and she was just, oh my gosh, you couldn't like breathe in her direction and she would like, come at you. And I was not allowed to have my imaginary friend when I was like 4 or 5. And I had to like send her away or something. I don't know, but one day she was there and the next day she was gone. And I still remember sometimes I dream about it. So I don't think I've dealt with this trauma yet, but sometimes I dream about like her looking for me. And I'm like old now. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you've been looking for me for like all this time, like 20 odd years. I'm sorry. I don't know what to say, And it's like, I would never want to do that to my kid, whether it's a real thing or not a real thing. The fact is, my brain thinks it's real. My experience thinks it's real. And I don't, why would you put that hurt and that pain on anything? And it's like, parenting used to be so weird. Where, why, and
Yeah,
how, you know?
yeah, yeah. I once, a good friend of mine is a medium, and he talked to my grandmother, who was equally as kind of, and she said, I wanted to harden you because I used to be like you, and I wanted to harden you because I wanted to help with the difficulty that I thought you were going to have if you weren't hard.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I don't know. Maybe it's true from,
You're
I
like, I
don't
still
know.
haven't do this. I still have to get this person back in my life. I want my imaginary friend back in my life.
Yeah.
And then I might be able to forgive my grandmother, right?
And I get it. Like I've had experiences where she wanted to come through, when I'm either with like my psychic friends or something, or someone's doing a reading for me. Sometimes in QHHT, when I'm trying to get information about the books, she will like want to come through, and I'm like, I don't want to, I'm not interested. I don't know what you have to say, but I really don't care. Like I don't want to talk to you. I don't want
Yeah.
to have anything to do with you. And I don't know, maybe it's just mean from my end now, but I get it. She's expanded now. She's big now. She's different. She had her purpose for doing what she did. I just still feel somewhat resentful, you know.
I
I don't
totally
know.
get that. I totally get that. I mean, that's like one of the things that I really enjoy doing in my own work with people is like, recognizing that we create that the person becomes the villain and they become the kind of point in which we swing our pendulum around in one aspect of our lives, not in all of our aspects of our lives, but in one aspect, right? And so for you, maybe there's keeping her there keeps this swing stable, right? And it allows you to explore all of its different avenues. So right now, if she's the thing that's holding it so that you're allowed to explore, and that means that if you're down here and you're swinging, you're never going to be here, right? That's okay. That's okay because it's allowing you to explore what that looks like. And there may be a point in which you're done with this exploration, and
Yeah.
therefore you can absolve her of that,
Yeah,
right?
that makes sense. And I think it will come to a point where I'm ready to deal with it. I'm just not right now. I've got so many other things going on. She's definitely not my
Oh yeah.
priority, whatever. Uh,
She's allowed to go into timeout for a little bit.
yeah, she can
There's
think
no
about what
timeout.
she's done. I mean, she's caused a lot of harm to a lot of people. She's got thinking to do. So I'm good. But I think it's so weird because that's the same thing. It's like also dealing with an extra sense, or like a different type of being that's not physical human anymore, which I think also falls under the category of kind of, I don't know if I want to say yeah, she's kind of extra dimensional now because she's in a different dimension than I am in, well, part of me. So it's all so different, and there's so many things to explore, and there's so many things to understand and know. And I don't think I don't know how many lifetimes it's going to take to know everything. I don't even think all, the lifetimes will be possible unless you literally become all that is and then you know everything. But it's like this exploration and this expansion process, it's so fascinating. And it's also so, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. It's like tedious in a sense. It's like, oh, I get to the one stage and now there's a new thing I've unlocked that I need to understand and explore. And then you go through that and it's like, oh, there's more and there's more. And you never get to the end of it. And then you have to get to a point where you make peace with that. Like, oh, maybe there is no end. and this is what it is, you know?
Yep. Yep. And I think the part that's the most relieving at one point is when the necessity of trying to fix yourself switches to a mentality of curiosity.
Yeah.
And then then you're just like, yeah, I love this stuff. This is great, right? And it's like, and if I do learn something that makes it so that I'm better at relating and helping my people feel loved, and I have more clarity, or I can hear things better or see things better, then that's wonderful. But those are always the auxiliary aspects of it, right? It's like, the curiosity becomes, to me, that curiosity and that exploration really is the driver for just like, yeah, this is so amazing, this place. Like, it's just so, and
Yeah.
I feel so fortunate to be here. It was really tough for a while.
Yeah.
Really tough for a while.
Yeah, because this is all there is, what else is there to do besides explore and just be open and curious about everything? If you want to be different and you don't want to deal with that, that's cool too. It's your perspective, but it's like, how do you not feel curious about these things? It's everywhere. It's in movies, it's in books. Everyone is like just so different. When I take a walk, like when I go to the mall or something, and I look at everyone and they're all so different, and they're tall and they're short and they're fat and they're thin and long hair and short hair and loud and soft. And I'm like, wow, there's so much diversity in this tiny little mall. Imagine, my country, or imagine my, I don't know, continent or the world. And then you're like, oh my gosh, planets. And then it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you're like, I'm gonna burst. There's so much. There's so much.
There is. I remember thinking that as a kid. I said, if my mind is as big as all of this, and every other person's mind is as big as all of this, like, what is this? If their interior world is as complex as mine is, like, holy crap. Like, what are we, you
Yeah.
know, and that's the thing, the exploration. Can I tell you a funny story about
Yeah.
yesterday?
Yeah.
I think it's funny about exploration and curiosity, right? So in addition to kind of doing stuff with, the way I think of the world is that there's an interior space, which is like the etheric plane. It's like all the places that you go when you die. It's like, kind of like, oh, I'm going to open a door and I'm going to leave this dimension and go into this space that doesn't have regional location, so to speak. It doesn't have a three-dimensional tie and anchor. And then you have the overlays, which are like all the layers that exist on top of this world, right? Like Photoshop layers, right? That you just can't see. And so I work a lot with nature spirits, especially and recently nature spirits and inanimate objects, because, or what we consider inanimate objects, right? Particularly my house has a spirit and my car has a spirit, right? And I'm always super careful. I've known from the beginning to never ever talk badly of my car. My car has 220,000 miles, which would be what, like 400,000 kilometers on it or something like that. Like, it's got like, this car is 15 years old. It's amazing. I love it. I hope it hears me. It's like right on the other side of that wall. I hope it hears me, and I'm just like, I always speak so kindly of it. And if I ever say anything, I'm always just like gratitude, 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 because I know that, as silly as it sounds, inanimate objects react to gratitude and to criticism in a very similar way to what everything else does. So that's a curiosity and exploration in and of itself. And so before yesterday or the day before, I was limited in my understanding of thinking that when you have a relationship with something like that, you're like, oh, I just need to be really kind to it and say nice things. But I was staying at somebody's house, and I kind of like criticized the house a little bit before I was there by myself, like they weren't there. I criticized the house a little bit. And then all of a sudden, a very key part of me leaving the house, which was closing the garage door, didn't work. And I was like, oh. And I heard my guide say, you need to be nice to everything. Like, you need to be nice to everything. Like, don't criticize something while you're dependent on it and while you're inside of it. And so yesterday, didn't learn my lesson. I was driving home from dropping off my daughter in the car, this car that I'm telling you about. And I started to joke because the car is very old and it doesn't, the driver's side window doesn't go down. And, this is like a swanky camp where everyone's got, there's like two cyber trucks and it's like, and so I'm sitting here with my my Mazda that I love so much. And I can't even roll down the window because I'm like literally like, so I have to open the door at all the checkpoints where they're trying to like check all the stuff for my daughter. And all the teens are trying to push the buttons to get the trunk to close. The trunk won't close. And so I'm on the highway telling my husband this. Literally a minute after that, a rock comes up and cracks the windshield. And you just say, and I was just like, okay, thank you for this exploration. Thank you for that one thing, which is a relatively easy thing to fix. Thank you for let me just have the gratitude for my car being like, look, this is an energy that you hold. Like, this car is moving off of its mechanics, but also the way that you've treated it, the gratitude that you've given it. Like, everything is working to help this machine to move in the way that it needs to move. There were two other times on that trip where we barely missed accidents, and I really feel like the car or some sort of the spirit, like a tractor trailer tire blew up right behind me, a trash can flew off of another car, and we basically just missed it. And I think it was like, do you understand how much I'm protecting you from on the road on a regular basis?
Yeah.
Have gratitude. Don't say anything bad about me, particularly while you're on the interstate, even
Yeah.
if your hands free. Yeah.
Wow, that is, it's such a funny topic, but I love it so much because I have experience with having gratitude and, criticism as well for objects that are seemingly not conscious.
Yeah.
And one day I was just thinking, well, if consciousness is in everything, it must be in everything, like even pillows and blankets and shoes. And I was like, I'm going to, for one day, just say thank you to everything that I interact with because it's there. And I spent the entire day, I was doing dishes that day and I had so many dishes. And I was like, oh my God, thank you for this fork. Fork, you are amazing. Thank you. Knife, you are wonderful. Thank you, cup, for the tea that I can hold in you. And I was like, this is weird. But you know what happened at the end of the day? I was so uplifted. I had so many good things come my way. I had like weird things happen to me during that day that were amazing. Like people would just like give me things, I would get gifts that day. I got a new client that day. I remember like things were just happening. And I was like, I wonder if this is because I'm just in the state of gratitude, like generally, or if it's something to do with the actual energy of the objects I was interacting with. Like, are they kind of being nice to me? Are they helping me? Like you said, the car is helping you. It's keeping you safe. It's doing things that you don't even know it's doing. And it's literally like keeping you alive. If it had to just disappear on you while you were driving somewhere, like you would just be flat on your butt in the middle of the road, you know?
Yes.
So it's wow. It's
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. And I think, and it relates because I think, one of the things that we found out that you've probably found out having read everybody's, articles at this point, right? Or chapters is that, everyone's got a different idea of what it means to be, extra dimensional,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's off of Terra or whether it's on Terra, whether it's, in one of those overlay layers, whatever it is. And, if we think of it as, I think in some ways it can feel comforting for that image to fall within the confines of what it's been depicted as externally, right? Either that or terrifying, depending on, if you're watching War of the Worlds sort of stuff or Signs sort of stuff, or if you're like, kind of on the other side of that. And what for me, in my chapter, what I was really trying to emphasize is that it's simply an understanding of the things that come to you to learn are oftentimes going to involve becoming more sensitive to the invisible layers, or the layers of things that not everybody has access to right now. And how do you prepare yourself, and how do you best deal with the unfamiliar that happens as a result of that, right? So whether it's an inanimate object, whether it's having the gratitude, gratitude to me is, and I call it the lubricant of life. Like, it's like it literally just makes it so that everything works differently and better. And it just, it's one of many what I would call higher dimensional allies. Higher, again, it's like extra dimensional allies. It's like we can't sense gratitude as a dimension yet, but we will maybe someday, right? We can't sense love as a dimension, but we will maybe someday, right? It's like, and knowing that we may not do it within our earthly human lives in this particular incarnation, but it doesn't mean that we still can't use those tools as they're available to us.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And do you know what an egregore is?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I
Yes.
once one of my teachers said to me once, like, imagine you're putting energy into this egregore, you're creating something, whatever it may be. The more you feed energy into it, the bigger and bigger it gets. So she was like, how many times do you say thank you in a day? And I'm like, I don't know, I don't count. Like, do you mean when I'm interacting with people, or like whatever? She's like, no, just in general. Like, how many times are you feeding the thank you egregore? And I'm like, oh, okay. So I can make it big and it will work for me, and I don't mean like in a manipulative sense, like, oh, do things for me. I just mean like it is there for you. You've literally created this huge, ginormous energy of thankfulness that is always going to be something you can fall back on the days you don't say thank you a lot. You're not going to fall into despair. You're not going to go into depression or whatever because you've created like this bank of thank yous. And I was like, that is amazing.
I
So,
love them.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I love that thought, that idea, that picture, that image. Because I never thought about it the same since then. Because even the thank you is, like you say, it's conscious, it's alive, it's energy, it's this thing, over time. So, wow, imagine.
Yep. Yep. I love that she used egregore as the concept too, because we know that we create, like every relative that we've had difficulty with in some ways is an egregore, right? They're accumulating and they're acting as a magnet for giving us an example, or they're giving us a warning for future people. It's like there's an understanding too that, like, it's incredibly important to create an egregore and in your life of gratitude, right? And like to really just like have this effigy, this connection, this collection point of everything, so that you have ready access to it. And then, we always kind of diminish, but also need to think about how important it is that as we're learning lessons and as we're kind of becoming more integrated, we also have negative egregores, right? We
Yeah.
also have the ones that, like, and that's necessary too, right? It's absolutely necessary for us to, at this point, that's one of the things that I've, I wrote it as the last aspect of the chapter. It was about, how resistance is absolutely one of the things. I mean, like, it's absolutely one of the reasons I believe that we're here, is to experience resistance, right? Like, we wouldn't even be able to be in a human body in this dimension if we didn't have a level of resistance that was
Yeah.
allowing us to do it, right? And if we didn't have, water and all these other different things that are kind of helping to keep this frequency confined to this, what feels like a very small kind of flesh being, right? You know what I mean? And like, and how incredibly necessary that is. We in and of ourselves are almost like egregores of our own spirit, right? That's just like, I'm gonna breathe, I'm gonna think about this person, and this person's gonna become, and I'm gonna put a small part of myself into this and see if this small part can remember who I am, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That is big. That is big. I never thought about that like that before, but that is big because that's what it is. And I was kind of like explaining to someone the other day. She said to me, she was at the book launch for the Ways to God book, and someone mentioned something about an oversoul. And we were on a call not long after, a couple of days later, we were on a Zoom call, and she said, someone mentioned oversoul. Like, can you explain that to me? And I'm like, you know, think of like a hand with individual fingers. Each individual finger is kind of like an individual soul or an individual spirit, but the hand is like the oversoul of those, but it's not as small as five fingers. It's ginormous and there are many layers, and oversouls can have oversouls. And she was like, oh, okay. I don't know if she got it or not. She didn't ask any follow-up questions, but it was like, I lost my train of thought. What were we saying?
We were just talking about egregores and how like a human is a version
Yes.
of an egregore, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I said to her, I said to her, if like your higher self is part of your oversoul, you have like you can remember, you can choose, you can connect, and then you can get more information. And then because she wanted to know like how is that related to when people say they are twin flames, or
Mhm.
my soulmate, or I can remember another incarnation or whatever. Like those are maybe the other fingers of the one oversoul. That's why you have such a strong connection to it. And so I was kind of like, it was kind of coming to me as I was explaining it to her, because I didn't know all of that before I said it. Well, maybe I did, but I didn't vocalize it before. And so I was like, yes, what you said now, like the small piece that's remembering the big piece. And then I don't know what it would be like to be that bigger piece remembering the bigger piece. Imagine that. That would be cool.
Exactly, exactly. I use the umbrella, right? And it's like instead of having just a single umbrella, it's like you have a whole bunch, the cores of all the umbrellas are kind of, and so then you have all these, and so sometimes you can remember being, and you can connect to the being that's on a different, who's
Yes.
still connected by that same central core, right? But maybe on a totally different umbrella. Or, the easier ones being the kind of deja vu aspects and stuff like that, which are the ones that are closer in your proximity, right? I had a friend who, she asked to connect to an aspect of her, and the other aspect of her was some alien aspect of her. It had like tentacles, and it had all these abilities, and so she would exchange abilities with one of, like, she was connected enough, and she had made the effort to be connected enough to somebody else who was on her, on her hand or on her umbrella. And so I think at one, that's where she kind of developed abilities to like light candles without, without matches, and just doing different things like that, because she was like, hey, let's exchange abilities, right? And it just became this like interaction with her and another aspect of herself that shared a core, that shared, a similar core, so she was able to connect with them more easily.
Wow, that is so exciting. That is
Yeah.
so exciting. I am looking, towards like learning more about these things, because I've never really had the interest in going deeply into these things. But because like the past lives thing is one thing, when people will say, oh, I whatever past life and you did this and that. My thing was, I didn't want to know about any of the other aspects of things that I am connected to, because I don't want it to interfere with what I'm doing here and now. I do know that it is playing a role, whether I'm aware of it or not. But, I don't know if I want to know. What if I was a bad guy? And now I have this like baggage. Oh, I'm a bad guy in another lifetime, blah. Like I don't want to think about it. But yeah, so
I can understand that. Yeah, I think just assuming you've been a bad guy is a pretty good thing to do, right? Just be like, I know I was a bad guy. It
there's
happened.
so many infinite possibilities. I'm sure one of them I was a bad guy. Like I
Yeah,
have to be. There's so many. There's so many, and there has to be some type of balance too. So if I'm
exactly.
if I'm putting like a numerical value to it, if I had 100 lives, sure 50% of them are probably pretty bad. And then the other 50 are going to be pretty good because there must be some kind of balance, you know? I don't know how the balance is measured or whatever it may be, but there is a balance happening. I know that.
There
So
is.
yeah, so it would be so cool to connect with the good stuff, and be like, oh, give me some of your abilities. Let's do the stuff. Let's do some things together.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's a very interesting thing. I mean, I think it's a similar kind of moment that you come to as you know, having done kind of, afterlife experience and near death things and things like that, the realization that you're never alone, that there's no such thing as privacy, right? Like when you kind of come to that, like I remember when I first came to that, I was like, really? Like all that stuff I do there is like not private. And now I just like kind of embrace it because I'm just like, yeah, it's all good. It's like there's nothing that's not known and I'm okay with that, right? Like I've just
Yeah.
got to have to accept that. And all that means all of the bits and pieces of me being good, bad, any judgment that I would have of what those things are, it's like, yeah, all right, cool.
Yeah.
I'm
And
in.
that's like this literally the records, like people can go in and read it. Well, there is some type of, layers of protection and things like that. But literally, you are open, you are an energy bubble floating and doing things, and everyone knows what you're doing. I think the privacy thing is more like important when it comes to like being a human, because like, I mean, I don't
Exactly.
want to go to the
Exactly.
loo and everyone knows what I'm doing in there, but you know, but like normal stuff, I don't know, like being energy being, I don't have things that I need to hide. Like I don't,
Yeah.
need to close the door when I'm changing. I don't need to change. I don't have a body. It's like, so you realize, oh, all these little issues and limiting beliefs I have is only related to the human thing. That is also like, wow. And you mentioned earlier about like how the resistance is like a physical thing. It's not a spirit thing because you
Yeah.
have to, manifestation is instant. Like everything is just so perfect. There's no need for resistance unless you want to have a physical experience with a limited thing. And limiting, the word limited is not like a negative thing, it's just means you're limited so that you can explore within this little bucket everything you can explore, which is already so much. It's not even that limiting, honestly. I don't
Yeah.
know.
That's why when you get into being a creative person and like when you get into fully into the creative world, you start to recognize that, creating a limitation is one of the things that can create some of the most amazing art,
Yes.
right? And whatever it is, creating, whether it's a prompt or whether it's a restraint, so much of creation loves to hit up against the walls of itself
Yeah.
in order to truly be challenged.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I think on that note, I am super excited about this book. I look
Yep.
forward to sharing it with everyone. I will put all the links in the description, where to get your pre-orders and all that. And I'll put your
Mhm.
links as well, where people can find you and learn more about you and work with you and all that good stuff. And this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Amira.
I appreciate you.
Appreciate you too.